The thing about The Boys is that it's punk rock, and it hurts extra hard when punk rockers sell out. I'm really working hard not to sell out. Yeah, that checks out. Hi there, everyone. Local The Boys comic defender here. And hey, would you look at that? My schedule's opened up between having bad takes and laughing at homeless people. You guys want to hear me trash on the show for the next 26 minutes? Great, I knew you would. But okay, seriously, what are we doing here? Well, as you might be aware if you keep up with my community posts, which you probably don't because you're a functioning member of society, I've been meaning to do a thorough deep dive into The Boys ever since the 4th season dropped back in July? Jesus, I've been slacking like hell, but I've had some projects that have gotten in the way and are honestly still in the way as I'm recording this video, so while you guys are waiting for that review that might never come, I thought it'd be fun to start off small by talking about something Boys related that I've had on my mind for the past couple of months. That being this quote from the showrunner Eric Kripke saying The Boys is quote-unquote punk rock. A phrase that at first I just kinda accepted, seeing as I don't spend every part of my day trying to ruin it, but as I had time to really think it over, I slowly started to realize, hold on, that's very dumb and pretentious and it doesn't fit The Boys at all. Like, at first I understood where he was coming from. The show makes fun of consumerism, highlights disturbing realities, comments on social issues, isn't afraid to be provocative and gross to help get its words across. Those are all things that a punk would do, but then I really started to wonder if the way the show handles those topics is comparable to how a punk would, and to give you my answer as respectfully as possible, my god, that's amazing. You are so talented. Wait a minute, something's not right here. You were just making it look like you were punk. You're a phony. Hey everyone, this guy's a great big phony! And I'm not joking around here either. I genuinely feel like The Boys is a show that puts on the appearance of punk more than it does actually resemble the things that punk stands for. And so to help prove it, I'm gonna go through all the things I just listed it does that are associated with punk and explain why its version of each of them has recently, if not always been, high-key pretty shallow. By the way, this video is made with the assumption you're caught up on The Boys and I don't have to explain it to you, so keep that in mind if you plan to keep watching, okay? You got it? Good. With that being said, let's open this can of worms from the angle that's easiest to get started with. The way the show makes fun of consumerism. So, one of the most basic things anyone knows about The Boys is that it was made to comment on modern superhero franchises, which is something that from the offset, you could distinctly label as being punk. I mean, fighting back against a wave of shiny corporatism through grimy satire that flat out says just how ridiculous the whole thing is, that's punk rock as hell. Granted, you could argue the series was less punk given its bottom paid for by one of the biggest corporations in the world, Amazon, but yeah, whatever, that's superficial stuff. It's the message that counts above anything else. Green Day's Dookie didn't stop being punk because it sold 1 billion albums. It was about the convictions of the group and the disillusionment they had for the establishment. That's what matters. Sticking it to the man, even if you're on his dime. Really, the only way The Boys could actually be in the wrong here is if they did the things they explicitly mocked those corporations for doing. But what are the chances of I'm going to enter a Walmart's and not do anything sinister? Yeah, I know, I'm not exactly breaking new ground with this observation, but if I'm gonna talk about how The Boys fails as punk, I need to point this out that the moment the crew got big enough to do it, they started making spin-offs. And not just one spin-off, no, it started that way, with The Boys Diabolical, but then it expanded into The Boys Gen V, then it was announced we get The Boys VOD Rising, and then it was announced we get The Boys Mexico. And I don't think I've ever heard a name for a spin-off that sounded more unnecessary in my entire life. Like, dude, that's 4 goddamn spin-off shows that are all connected. This is the very thing they mocked and continue to mock DC and Marvel for. And don't try to excuse it with the idea of, oh, it's completely optional. You don't have to watch it, because first of all, for each new season of Gen V, the main show has been taking an extra year off, so what else are you supposed to watch as a fan to fill that hole? And secondly, it contains important information about characters like Vic, plus characters from it show up at the end of Season 4 and are implied to have a role in Season 5, so I'd argue it's not just something that you can ignore. Not to mention the obvious fact that punk is all about sticking to your principles, and this is the definition of selling out. They are expanding their brand against their own rules to make money. And I haven't even mentioned the appearances in video games and the merchandise, and the various other tie-ins. You know, say what you will about them, I personally don't have as much of a problem with them as the spin-offs, but come on, man, it is not punk rock. This shit is to punk rock what Kiss is to heavy metal, and it doesn't get any better when you actually look at the content of the show, like the way it flip-flops on whether or not it highlights disturbing realities depending on how those realities are viewed socially. Case in point, the vastly different approaches the series takes to handling Annie and Huey's assaults. So for anyone who's watched even the first episode of the show before, I shouldn't have to explain to you the significance of Annie's workplace assault that she faces from the deep. It's the basis for her arc in the first season, it washed away the rose-tinted lenses she saw heroes through, it got her to ask questions that led to her eventually leaving Vought in season 3, it morphed into an identity crisis she had in season 4, and most importantly of all, it was treated with care and respect for the people who'd gone through the same thing, and serves as one of the earliest showcases of the boys tackling serious issues in the industry. By all accounts, this was a punk rock approach to covering the problem, facing it head-on and unflinchingly with the passionate fury of every single person that problem affected. And then there's what happened to Huey. Oh man, I'm honestly not sure if I want to talk about this, seeing as it makes me extremely uncomfortable, but here we go. So, in Season 4, Episode 6, as part of an infiltration mission gone wrong, Huey ends up stuck in a BDSM dungeon getting assaulted by Ashley and the hero Tech Knight, and it is played very specifically for pure laughs. Like, oh, isn't that great? They made him fart into a cake against his wishes. Tee-hee-hee, Ashley rubbed her fluid on his face. Ha ha ha, Tech Knight wants to carve holes in Huey's body with a knife and then fuck them until he dies. Funny? Alright, I'm not the type who likes to use the argument, imagine if this were a blank and see how it comes across, but God, imagine if this was a woman. Oh wait, you don't have to, I just got done talking about it. Although at least with Annie there was never the prospect of death involved, she was just pressured under threat of possibly losing her job, which of course I don't want to play down or anything, but it's kind of hard for me not to do that when this is a million times worse. And there's even a reason to directly compare the two, being that Deep was Annie's childhood crush and Tech Knight was Huey's favorite hero. There is a direct correlation between these two events, and yet one is treated with the reverence and impact it rightfully should, while the other gets played for jokes and never gets brought up again afterwards. No, for real. We never see how it hurts Huey or possibly traumatizes him. There's not even a scene. At best, it's just the catalyst for him breaking down about shit that happened to him episodes prior. And it's not the last time he gets assaulted in this either, since alright, we also have the shapeshifter fiasco, where after Annie gets replaced by a shapeshifter who can copy all her thoughts as well as her appearance, the shifter decides to repeatedly have sex with Huey and even convinces him to marry her just because she wants to fuck with them. Now, under every measure of reality, this is clearly rape, knowing the shapeshifter tricked Huey into sex under false pretenses and was purposefully fucking with him psychologically, but do you know what Annie says when she finds this out? Why, that of course Huey would do this, seeing as the shapeshifter was nothing but Annie's desirable traits without the things that make her human. Girl, he was raped! Over a dozen times! You are blaming the victim right now! Oh, and then once she's calmed down and gotten the chance to compose herself after Huey makes a speech about forgiveness as if he needs to be forgiven,
you are getting tested for every single disease known to mankind, okay?
Wow, just... wow. Wow! Okay, so I kind of got lost in my ranting about the show there, but the point I was trying to make is that if someone was really trying to do this like a punk would, emphasizing horrible flaws in society they felt passionately angry about, then it would only make sense that they could stay consistent in that passion, especially in a case like this where in recent years, assaults against women by people in power have been a topic of discussion for about a decade now, as it should be, while male assault in general, despite being just as valid and potentially traumatic, is sadly treated in society like a joke. It's part of why I have a lot of respect for the original Boys comic, given how whether it was Annie, Huey, the G-Man, a trans woman, or anyone else who was involved in some type of horrific forced assault in the comics, it was always treated as a serious thing that heavily affected them and wasn't their fault. This is what having a punk rock attitude about addressing a problem looks like. It's consistent, since Garth Ennis genuinely cared about the weight assault had when it happened to anyone and wanted that severity severity to come across in his work, whereas in The Boys TV show, with the way it makes a total mockery of male victims like Huey, I can't help but think that them treating Annie's assault correctly wasn't as much because they cared about the topic, but because they wanted to seem noble without putting in the work to get why it really mattered. Like, they understood that women being assaulted by men in authority is bad and should be treated seriously, but they never thought about the deeper implication that at the root of the idea, the thing that people are mad about is that all assault is bad and should be treated seriously. I mean, I don't throw this term around lightly, knowing how loaded it can be when used in the wrong context, but what happens to Huey in season 4 makes season 1's great portrayal feel like performative activism. And again, I wouldn't make that claim if I didn't think I had to, but shit, this is what that term was fucking made for. I legitimately could not believe my eyes when I was watching this for the first time. It was so blatantly distasteful and tone deaf. You're gonna tell me you care about victims when you're having my man repeatedly getting victim blamed and then directly say it's hilarious in interview? Fuck off, dude, what's next? Are you gonna tell us animal cruelty is bad except when it's mice since you think they're icky and gross? Get some goddamn perspective here. A punk rocker would not have double standards like this. Punk rock is about breaking from traditional standards, being authentically unapologetic and intricate, and not bending at the knee or dumbing yourself down when it matters most. That's what a punk rocker would do. And sir, you are not him. Or her. Not sexist. And speaking of dumbing yourself down when it matters most, how about we get into the way The Boys comments on social issues in the most dumbed down way possible through my least favorite character of the entire show, Firecracker. Yeah, I'm aware I could probably center this section around a couple different guys if I really wanted to, but I think Firecracker sums up my problems best in the sense that while the series wants to convey a certain idea about her from the beginning, they don't really commit to it fully because they don't want another implication to come through. See, in our first introduction to Fire, she's at a far-right conspiracy con preaching dumb theories to her moronic audience. And once she's called out on this by Sister Sage, she admits the reason she's doing it is so she can profit off giving the people she's presenting to the feeling they have purpose they otherwise wouldn't have. Now, this isn't the most original thing in the world of commentary. If you look at most Boondocks episodes, you can find they're more or less saying the exact same thing in a much funnier way, but hey, in context, it's a perfectly fine bit of character. Until it isn't. Because right after this moment, during almost every following scene where Fire doesn't have to put on an act, we find out that while she doesn't believe in these hyper-specific theories, to an extent, she actually is a stupid, gullible, over-patriotic racist pedophile who believes almost everything she's saying to her wider fanbase. So, wait. She's cunningly self-aware and knows how to peddle bullshit, but is also a total dumbass who buys into most of that same bullshit. How does that work? Well, in all honesty, it really doesn't from a character perspective, but if you want to know why it happens, that's a lot easier to parse. It's because while the show is open to showing how extremists are often insanely conniving and greedy, they're not nearly as willing to say that some are downright smart, even if it's in the context of them using that wit to do something wrong. Like, to go back to the Boondocks to show how it's done right, in the Season 2 episode The S Word, which by the way is one of my favorite all-time Boondocks episodes, we get a representation of the conservative media pundit Ann Coulter, who, after going on a tirade about why white people should be able to say the N-word, is completely different off camera. She's much less rigid, she's dating a black man, she's friends with the reverend she was just arguing with on live TV, and this is all to tell us that she's only really doing what she does here for the sake of money. It's clearly saying the exact same thing as what we got with Firecracker. The only real difference is that in the Boondocks, they don't attempt to backtrack or soften the blow in any way that would ruin it. There's never a moment where, after seeing how fake Ann Coulter is and learning her ulterior motives, that she just flat out says she believes 90% of what she said, since that doesn't make any fucking sense. It's oxymoronic. Saying that someone is a conscious manipulator who goes after easy targets and saying they're a dummy Dumbo who actually thinks most of what they're telling people are two completely opposing concepts. They actively work against each other on a logical basis. But the Boys staff can't seem to resolve that discrepancy in their minds since they don't want to show extremist far-righters as having certain positive traits despite those traits being needed for them to do what they do. And I feel like that's maybe the biggest thing that holds the show back from having good commentary in its later seasons. It doesn't know how to treat its villains. You know, the way I see it, at the start of The Boys, they pretty much had two distinct types of villains, the real villains and the joke villains. The real villains were people like Homelander, Stillwell, partially A-Train, characters who were smart and resourceful and intimidating no matter what scenario they were put in. The kind of villains the cast would never want to cross, knowing they wouldn't hesitate to fucking kill them. Then on the other side of the spectrum, you had the joke villains, characters like the Deep or Ezekiel, guys who represented negative groups like workplace harassers or fake Christians looking to get a buck, and so therefore were shown to be weak and stupid to make fun of the people they represented. But with Firecracker, you know, it's kinda different because she's sort of a mix between both of them, so it leads to this weird struggle between identities where one minute she's totally in control and a conscious active threat, then the next she's a bumbling clown who can barely tie her shoelaces without tripping over herself. Now, I'm not against either of these depictions individually, seeing as both these types of extremist far-righters do exist, but it's the merge of the two into just one person that makes me frustrated, since to me, it shows a lack of faith in the audience to get that these guys are an accurate depiction of the far-right without making them a joke. Like, if they don't make it clear all the time that these guys are incompetent jackasses, you won't be willing to believe that they're far-right extremists. Since far-right extremists can't be smart or cunning, no, that's not possible. And even if it is, they're still jackasses at the root of it all, right? But is that really true? I mean, don't get me wrong, I hate far-right conspiracy theorists and influencers just as much as the next guy. You're not gonna catch me taking strays for the sake of Miss Not Like Us over here. But isn't it also kind of pandering to act like they can't be smart without any caveats? You know, it's easy to feed into someone's biases by saying, yeah, that type of person you hate, they really do act that way all the time. Those far-right influencers are all completely stupid. But in real life, it's not nearly that simple, given how, at least most of the time, bad people don't just get what they have through pure random chance or charisma, which I think is why they included Sister Sage in Season 4 to give dum-dums like Fire and Homelander a fighting chance, being that as incompetent dum-dums, they obviously couldn't get far on their own, but with help from her, a smart person who just decided to topple a government because blah 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 stupid backstory blah 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 why not? Now they've got the tools to succeed. Ah, thank God, it finally makes sense. How else could these jokers ever pull out a win? But again, this is just pandering. It's denying the reality that people on the far right who are terrible people can also be smart, so they don't have to bother with challenging the mindsets of their viewer base. Since hey, if they think far righters are just dumbass cartoon villains that happen to hit the jackpot despite their incompetence, then, well, who are we to say no? Why should we be the ones to tell them there's depth, that far-righters can be more than just pathetic jokers and we shouldn't underestimate what they can do? I mean, that would be going counter to the takes of our current audience. Some might even call it our culture of sorts. Wait, what was that word for people who are counter-cultural again? It's on the tip of my tongue. It doesn't matter. The point is, we can't be those people because it would be really hard. And as everyone knows, the best commentary is the kind that doesn't make you think really hard. Alright, but cutting the bullshit to be real again, one of the things that separates good commentary from bad is the ability to show nuance. Like, you want to know what really good commentary looks like? Check out any episode from King of the Hill, or hell, just anything from Mike Judge period, seeing as that guy understands the appeal of satire more than almost anyone else in the industry, and it comes across in his work. Like, for instance, the whole idea behind King of the Hill is that it's about generational disconnect. On one end, you've got the proudly American, traditional dad Hank. On the other, you've got his open-minded, untraditional son Bobby, and it's the clash between these two on how they think that makes up the show's comedy, but it differs from The Boys in that both sides act like people. Now, that's not to say that they're both always good or both always reasonable, it just means that they both act logically consistent to their personalities regardless of what scenario they're put in. And since the King of the Hill writers keep these bits in mind while writing their commentary, it helps the conclusions they come to feel a whole lot stronger by making it feel like a clash between two real people instead of a clash between a guy and the cardboard cutout of one he can bend and warp so it's easier to hit. And what sucks the most is that they didn't even have to bend Firecracker to make her an easy target. She was already a scuzzball with bad morals who profited off weak people by peddling bullshit she didn't believe in. That's plenty enough to work with as is, and a great representation of the reality behind far-right extremists. So the only reason I can see for why they choose to make her actually stupid and gullible, in addition to that, was so they wouldn't have to challenge their viewers' black and white perceptions, or maybe even their own perceptions. I don't know, it's plausible, but either way, I can tell you this much, it's not really punk rock, because in the same way a punk wouldn't bend their own morals just to benefit themselves, they'd also be sure to keep it real with you regardless of how they think you'd respond. But The Boys these days doesn't want to challenge or show nuance, it just wants to reinforce your beliefs without saying anything insightful for fear of making you mad, and frankly, I'm getting a little sick of it. Oh, and Fire's just the same 3 stale jokes repeated over and over again all season, so even disregarding how inconsistently she's written, she's also just completely insufferable and only gets more annoying over time. Something I could also use to describe how the show's shock factor is increasingly becoming more reliant on excessive sex and violence. And looky here, I am not someone who's averse to excessive violence. That stuff's my jam. I went to see Terrifier 2 opening day in theaters. A good special effect or creative kill is something I can appreciate basically any day of the week. And I can equally appreciate how punks like to use striking visuals or provocative lyrics to help convey the importance of what they're trying to get across. However, I feel like the way The Boys uses violence has gotten way less purposeful and way more over the top purely so it can lean into this identity of being punk rock and edgy. Like, when you look at the start of The Boys, the violence is still incredibly graphic. One of the first things we see is a girl being turned into jelly as a result of A-Train running through her, but still, at least during the first season, for the most part, it felt like that violence was there for a reason, to help underscore the grimier, more realistic approach The Boys takes to superheroes as a concept compared to something cleaner like DC or Marvel, where everything's way more polished and safe. It made a statement about the world these characters live in, and while it could get extreme for the sake of jokes, it never felt like it was being so over the top so frequently that it got annoying. They did ride the line a couple times, mostly during the season 3 premiere where a guy shrinks down, climbs inside another man's dick, sneezes, and then grows back from him, cutting the guy in half, but man, somehow season 4 just takes it to another level, and it's way more in your face about it than the earlier seasons ever were. I mean, the shrinking guy was one thing, at the least it was a really creative idea that in a way sort of riffed on a meme about Ant-Man and Thanos from the time, but then starting in season 4, we got stuff like a guy who can clone himself making a human centipede to eat his own ass and then pulling out a hair. Sister Sage having characters give her a lobotomy so she can get dumb and want to bang them. Almost a full episode of Huey getting kinkily tortured until Tech Knight says he's going to carve holes in him so he can then fuck those holes until he dies. Like, there's not really anything clever about these moments. They're just there so the show writers can pat themselves on the back and say, "We're so goddamn counterculture, dude." And that's precisely what the social media did to hype up each new episode as they were coming out. It was almost nothing but, "Whoa, this is the most graphic thing you've ever seen. I can't believe they let us get away with it." But you know who could believe it? Me. I could believe they were doing something raunchy and violent every single time they said they would, since from the beginning that was what the show was built on. It's just that up until recently, they never made it the near sole focus of the marketing. I think the thing that took them over the edge with this was Herogasm, seeing as the entire point of that episode was that, like the comic event, everything was explicitly more graphic than usual for the sake of having a fun time. And it was pretty fun, for that one time, when it was an event. But I guess the showrunners took the wrong idea from it with how successful its marketing was, saying this was the grossest thing we've ever done, and thought the only way to recreate that kind of buzz was by continually one-upping themselves. "Oh, you want something edgy? You want something disgusting? Well, gather around, fuckos, look at this! Ain't that gross? Ain't that indecent? Ain't we going against the current culture with this one?" But again, no, you're not, because you've already conditioned your current audience to be used to this. Anyone who was genuinely appalled by what you're doing wouldn't have made it all the way to season 4 to watch this happen in the first place. When Damien Leone made Terrifier 3, he didn't feel the need to go on press junkets saying how intense the kills are gonna be. It was already implied. And speaking of Terrifier 3, that movie made about $90 million domestically last year, which I'd say is a pretty clear testament to the fact that most Americans aren't even turned off by violence in the first place. That's why it's one of the top streaming shows on Amazon alongside Invincible, another superhero show with intense gore. People like that shit. Hell, at this point, having a bunch of violence isn't a repellent against normies at all. It's a selling point. Literally. They quite literally use it to market the series now. And hey, if that's what they want to do, then more power to them. But don't act like it's some sort of revolutionary thing that you're rebelling against the system with this one, man. Bitch, you practically are the system. You're one of the top streaming shows around. You've got a budget that's comparable to Game of Thrones at its peak. You've got 4 spin-off shows, one of which is about to get a second season. You're able to pull names like Jeffrey Dean Morgan, Jensen Ackles, Giancarlo Esposito, Simon Pegg, Tilda Swinton, goddamn Will Ferrell. And you think you're punk rock? Why? Because you made fun of the biggest franchise in the world while doing exactly what they do? Because you make fun of far-right extremists a majority of people already agree are terrible while almost intentionally avoiding nuance about the topic? Because you've gradually upped the sex and violence for an audience that's already been conditioned to accept it? Oh my god, such groundbreaking stuff, guys. You're really fighting the power there. About as much as Elon Musk tweeting out memes saying to fight the power from within the fucking White House, that is. I mean, seriously, how can you be this unself-aware, Kripke? The show has Funko Pops. It is not punk rock. Been meaning to get that one off my chest for a while now. Full Boy show review coming soon? I don't know, man. I'm tired, but sooner or later, it'll probably happen. Probably. Where are my Bakugan Part 4 viewers at, huh? Well, anyway, thanks for watching. I've been Just Stop, and I'm going to bed. See ya.